Oi, gente, que honra, que prazer estar aqui com esse grande, grande músico dessa banda que eu adoro há tanto tempo, Page Hamilton do Helmet, e a banda vai tocar na quarta-feira, dia 30 de abril, fazer um show único no Carioca Clube em São Paulo, que eu vou conversar com o Page sobre a carreira dele no Helmet e antes do Helmet também. Hey, Page, great to speak to you. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, you too, Andre.
And I want to ask you, before we get to Helmet, I'm really curious about your life before, a little bit before Helmet. When you arrived in New York, I mean, it's such an amazing musical scene at that time in the city, right? I mean, second half of the 80s, I guess. I mean, so much stuff
Yeah.
happening in the city. Can you speak a little bit, talk a little bit about how was New York at that time?
I moved in 85 and I got into grad school. I flew out to audition in grad school in 85 in the spring, I believe, in May. And I got accepted. And so I've ended up heading out there in August. It was this fantasy that I was going to get a cool apartment and I was gonna, I was gonna live in New York City, man. And
Yeah.
I had $600, uh, and I was like, wow, I ain't getting an apartment, so I got a room at a welfare hotel,
Yeah.
in on 99th and Broadway called the Clinton Arms, um, and but I was happy as a clam. I was just so thrilled to be in New York. The
Yes.
energy was incredible. There was so much going on musically. I fantasized about New York for a couple of years because of my jazz heroes, because that's where bebop was essentially born. Even though Charlie Parker, came from Kansas City, and John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk came from North Carolina, and so on and so forth. Louis Armstrong, pre bebop came from New Orleans, obviously. Um, and so that's why I wanted to live there, because I all my heroes,
Yeah.
live there. And yeah, I was super naive. I didn't, I had no idea what it was going to be like. And I probably, you know, did things that were not smart, like going to Harlem and, I met a dude I was, at a bar called the Star Bar downtown, and this they had live jazz. This would have been before I moved there, by the way. This was in 83.
Okay.
Um, and started talking to this dude named Alfonso Johnson, and we were just having, I was like just a nice dude, and having a beer, and he said, "Hey, do you want to come see my bar? It's up in Harlem." And it's like, "Yeah." So I got to get. He drove a cleaning van, and so I got to ride above ground, and I could see the city for the, really see it for the first time, because you're in the subway, you don't see anything. And I got to this bar, and I was the only white dude in the whole place, and but people were super cool. There was no judgment, no, like it was just really fun to hear this band just slamming band playing kind of funk stuff, and they were just dressed to the nines, and I just fell in love with the energy. I felt like, being kind of naive and, fearless in a way, or dumb, I don't know. I experienced a lot more than a lot of my friends ever experienced, because people get so, afraid to kind of go outside their comfort zone,
Yes. Yes.
So.
And I mean, you were talking about the jazz scene in New York, but I mean, you arrived there at a pretty beautiful, great time also for like no wave bands and punk bands, hardcore going really strong. CBGB's still relevant, I guess, right? Mid
Oh,
80s. Yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah. How was that? I mean, did you explore a lot like the underground rock scene and punk scene?
Later, yeah. I mean, I had no interest in it really. When I got there, I was all about, jazz,
Yeah.
and I had gotten my bachelor's degree in jazz guitar and
Yes.
classical guitar. I studied classical music as well, and then when I got to New York, it was get my master's in jazz. And when I graduated, that's when I started to discover that music,
Hmm.
and I started. I said I had no plan, but I was just going to audition for every band that I could find. And I auditioned for a lot of different bands. One was a band called The Children. They were kind of folky,
Okay.
folky hippie, really cool. Then I auditioned for a band. I can't remember the name, downtown, and where the guy wore a skinny tie, and they played really loud. There was another cover band out in Queens, I think. And then I discovered Band of Susans, and that was kind of a eye opening.
Yes.
And they said, we'd love for you to be in the band, and so I joined that. And then I started. Then I auditioned for Glenn Branca,
Hmm.
and I got in Glenn's guitar orchestra. So those two things, I think, led me. Like I rediscovered rock music, for better
Yes.
term, but it was bands like Killing Joke and Wire and Gang of Four and the Undertones, the Buzzcocks, all that music. I was like, well, wow, this is great shit. Like I loved it. And it was all guitar oriented music. But it wasn't Journey and
Yeah.
Foreigner and Toto, because
Yes.
that music, when in the 70s, I turned me off to rock, to be
Yes.
honest with you. And it's nothing against those bands, Boston and Journey and Foreigner and Toto and all those bands. They're all great bands. It just didn't float my boat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. It was there's something sort of polished about it that, there's Steve Lukather, who's, you
Sure.
know, one of my guitar heroes, as a session cat. He came up with the riff for Beat It, for crying out
Yes.
loud. I mean,
Yes.
he's amazing guitarist and writer. He said, some people didn't like Toto. One writer described us as what is he, a tangerine leisure suit. And I love that. And I thought, like, that's kind of how it hit me. I Over the last year, I've been listening to some Toto, because my bandmates, who are all younger than me,
Yeah.
love it. And I can appreciate it on a different level. I can like, song Africa is beautiful, and the
Yeah.
singer, that guy Eddie, whatever his name
Yeah.
is really fantastic. But it's not the same kind of punch in the face as Highway to Hell.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, that's the stuff that really gets me going. Like, so.
And and I mean, when you were playing in Band of Susans, this was like end of the 80s. You were already close to like 30, right? I mean, you were not like a young kid anymore, right?
Yeah, I was
And
28. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And when you started Helmet after Band of Susans, after you left I have Love Agenda, by the way. I love that album. I think it's great.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
when you experienced a very singular time in like the indie rock industry, right? The music
Yeah.
industry, because bands were record companies were investing a lot of money in the end of the 80s, and then the pinnacle was with when Nirvana exploded. I mean, and you were not a kid anymore. I mean, what was um your ideas musically in the end of the 80s? I mean, what did you want to do in your career?
All I ever wanted to do was just play music that I loved, and music that was mine.
Okay.
I didn't want to sound like anybody else.
Okay.
And when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, before I went to Germany to study, I yeah, I was extreme. Like, if anything sounded remotely even singable, like, that's too catchy, I would like throw it out.
Right.
Everything had to be like fucking off the wall and weird. And then
Right.
I came to appreciate, a great melody and chord changes, and you can write something that's pretty or catchy and still unique. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So, but I needed to force myself to stay away from anything familiar,
Hmm.
in order to kind of come up with the Helmet vocabulary. And
Yes.
I was turned on by, I must have listened to the first Killing Joke album 1,000 times. And Wire, Pink Flag, and Chairs Missing,
Yes.
another 1,000 times, and Gang of Four, Entertainment, and Solid Gold.
Yeah.
So those were kind of the core albums that really got me going.
Yeah.
Also, the Buzzcocks, obviously, Orgasmatic and that stuff, and the
Yeah.
Undertones. I saw that Petrol Emotion, which are guys from the Undertones,
Yes,
um,
Firgo
at,
Sharkey. Yeah.
yeah, at this dump in New York called the World, where like there was like the toilets were running from the upstairs, like pouring down. You know, it was just a shithole. Should have been condemned. It probably was condemned not long after that, but it was typical New
Yeah.
York City, like held together by chewing gum and like band-aids. You know,
Well, but there was great music coming from that dump. It
it's
was
true.
amazing. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. It was an amazing time to be there. It was really great.
And so I guess your guitar heroes from that time would be Geordie and Andy Gill, those guys from the
Yeah,
British post punk. Were those the guys that you were looking
yeah.
at? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I loved Husker Du and Big Black, you know, Albini's first band, you
Yes.
know, and you know, I love those records. I listen to those records a lot. I like the Replacements.
Hmm.
You know, you know, listen to a lot of that. You know, like I can't like you know, said I came to the party a little later. You know,
Yes.
this was, you know, would have been, you know, 88, 89, and those, you know, bands were around the early 80s, you
Yes.
know. Um, but yeah, I loved it, and it just kind of changed my the way I thought about rock music, you
Right.
know. And Glenn Branco was maybe one of the biggest influences on me because he had that whole like open tune guitar thing,
Yes.
and he's playing all these rhythm things, like, you know, playing, having the drummer play a straight four beat while we were playing, you know, like in seven or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, that kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, one,
Yeah.
two. So I'm in four over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or like as Glenn would do it, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2,
Right.
1, 2. He had numbers written out, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 with slashes for accents. So we would be in, that would be seven beats
Right.
over four. And it was really cool. And it kind of like got in my soul, but I'd already kind of absorbed that from listening to Kashmir,
Hmm.
uh, you know, 18,000 times,
Yeah.
you know, Led Zeppelin, because, you
Yeah.
know, but they were amazing at that.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
you know, like Bonzo playing that four groove and then, you know, then playing six or whatever against it. So that,
Yes.
I think it was, took kind of naturally to that, you know.
Did you during your time with Glenn Branca, did you meet the guys from like Sonic Youth and all those other guitar players that hung around him and who worked with him?
I didn't meet him at that time, but I met him later.
Hmm.
When we the first time Nirvana played New York, we opened for them at the Pyramid Club. It was
Okay.
when they had just become a three piece. I think they fired the other guitar player like literally the night before in Boston, and it was their drummer Chad was their
Yes.
drummer at the time. I can't remember his last name, but
Channing,
yeah, okay, yeah.
Chad
So
Channing. Yeah.
yeah, really good dude. And we Sonic Youth was there, and, you know, Iggy Pop. It was like the place to be. Nirvana was already kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
They only had, I think Bleach was out, um, and um, and we didn't have anything out. I think we had maybe like I don't think Strap It On was out yet. I think we had Born Annoying was out, but I talked to Thurston a couple of years later, several years later, and he said, "Yeah, I remember seeing you guys, and it was just too much." It was like I didn't know what to make of it. He was like so aggressive and intense, and he goes, "Now I get it." You know, like now I get to hear you guys every night, because we played shows with them in Australia, and he's like, "I love it." You know, so it's kind of funny. I think we were, uh, you know, a lot of people were kind of put off by us at first because it was like just like, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
very intense.
But looking back, I mean, that period was supposedly, I mean, very good for you guys, right? Because you had record companies investing in the band and you had it was a good time for indie rock. I mean, not that later on it kind of caught up, and after Kurt died, they had a lot of problems with majors with signing bands and then firing them. But at that
Yeah.
time, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s was kind of a golden era, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of like record companies are, you know, like unfortunately, many record companies are just camps of idiots, and
Yes.
they're like these people that really know nothing about music, but they'll jump on a trend and try
Yes.
to, you know, and that was going on with the Nirvana thing,
Hmm.
that said, were also some really intelligent people in that
Yeah.
world. I met a guy named Tim Carr at Warner Brothers who was really smart. He's since passed away, but we became friends, and he loved music. He tried to sign Helmet, but he had signed a girl band from goddamn, my friend Lori Barbero and Kat
Ba-
Bugelin,
ba- Babes in
Babes,
Toyland.
yeah, Babes in Toyland, and so there were people like him that knew it. There was a guy at A&M Records who signed Soundgarden. He was a very smart. I remember he said, I hear Led Zeppelin. I hear Led Zeppelin influence," and he was one of the only people to recognize that. Led Zeppelin had influenced, Helmet, and yeah. So there were people, but there were also a lot of dipshits
Yeah.
that like said really stupid shit, and like like we're somebody said, one guy, like, we we hear you're the next big thing, and if you strike a nerve like that Nirvana did, we'll be here for you. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, if we strike a nerve like Nirvana, like, and just I'm just like, whew, man, these people are dumb. uh, they're just these corporate, you know
Yes.
goobers. So we were just doing our thing, and I think, like, we benefited from Nirvana because we had built a following on our own, by playing clubs and by rehearsing religiously and being good.
Yes.
you know so many bands, they think they don't do the work. Like, they think that it's about getting a big break or
Yeah.
whatever. It's not. It's like, you have to do the work.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have to practice, you have to rehearse. So
So was Helmet a very disciplined band?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm pretty sure John and Henry never did drugs ever.
Right.
Like, like uh they drank. We all drank. But we rehearsed 3 days a week religiously. If your mom and mom and dad were in town, or your siblings or whatever. John had a sister. Henry's mom came out once. My I think my brother came out once, and but I said, bring him to rehearsal. Like, we're not going to skip rehearsal so you can spend time with your family. But yeah, 3 days a week, come hell or high water. And I think that's why we were a lot better than a lot of the bands in the city. They were so much sloppy crap. Like, you can you can't. It's not about a fashion aesthetic. It's about getting your music together.
True.
So
True. And when you listen to the albums that you guys did in the 90s, I mean, do you had total control, creative control of all the albums, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah,
And do you think that I mean, I'm pretty sure they influenced a lot of other things that came later, not some good, some bad, but I mean, the
yeah.
influence of Helmet is pretty, I mean, you can't understate that. I mean, so many bands that owe a lot to you guys. Do you see that?
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I've had so many people, tell me that from bands, like, I could, name drop, Dimebag, for one, or Jonathan, or Monkey from Corn, or
Yes.
Chino,
Yeah.
Surge. These people have all said to me, "Hey, we love your band, and
Yeah.
we do." I mean, Jonathan said, "None of us would be here without you," and I'm like, "Well, that's not true, but thank you." But yeah, no, I like the vocabulary um is very clear. In other words, the vocabulary didn't exist in that form before
Yes.
Helmet came along.
Yes.
So um uh, people absorbed, bits and pieces of it. Like, nobody completely got the whole harmonic, thing, and the, why. why we play these chords that are they're it's not non-tertial harmony, meaning there's no thirds in a lot of the chords.
Yes.
It's about common tones and creating like this upper harmonic kind of information that's interesting. And people are like, why do you play so loud? I mean, because that's how you achieve that. That's how you get those things to happen above. It's not just the chords that, the notes. If I play it on an acoustic guitar, there's going to be overtones, but when you amplify that and change the EQ or whatever, that's why I use pedals for solos, or maybe I'll add like more distortion and a chorus pedal, because it makes it changes the way those pitches are going to
Yes.
interact.
Hmm.
And it creates like, it's like, Jackson Pollock. It's like splattering paint on a canvas, you know what I mean? And there's a reason for it. It's not, a lot of musicians or non-musicians don't get that. The people that do have, then came like, look, I know I've been told System of a Down, we were an influence on them, but they sound nothing like us.
Yes.
They did their own cool thing, you know what I mean? And I love that. I think it's awesome.
But maybe the audience, I mean, the non-musician audience, which is the vast majority, they may not theoretically understand what you guys are doing, but they instinctively understand. I mean, your album struck a nerve. I mean, I've seen Helmet live many times, and it's an amazing experience,
Cool. Yeah. 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 No, there's I mean, I guess here we are. Betty's 31 years old, and
Yes.
we're gonna, here we're gonna come down and play those songs again. So that's pretty cool that it's holding up in my lifetime. Maybe by the time I'm dead, it'll be forgotten. I don't know.
It is, and we're almost into the end of our time here. Just need to ask about the show in São Paulo. The
Yes.
set list will be obviously centered on Betty, but
Yep.
I guess that you'll play selections from all the other albums too.
What we do is we do the whole album beginning to end, and I don't say a word. I
Yes.
just want to play the album, because I grew up in the 70s when you would just drop the needle,
Yeah.
listen to the album,
Yes.
put the headphones on. Like, that's how music should be heard. And then I'll introduce the band, say, hey, how you doing? And then we do another set.
That's
It's
perfect.
like sort of 8 or 10 songs, and maybe an encore, depending on how it goes. And um yeah, it's been really, really fun. I gotta say, I didn't think, I didn't imagine when we put Betty out in 1994 that, here we 30 years later, we'd be touring the world, because we're going to Australia, New Zealand next year to do it. And they want to extend the US tour. We just did a month or 5 weeks, and they want to go to the southern part of the country now. So it's
Amazing.
cool. It's been fun. It's been really fun. So
Well, it's an amazing album, man. Thank you very much for this, Paige. It was
yeah,
such
man.
a
Yeah.
pleasure speaking to you, and see you in São Paulo.
Yeah. Yeah. Come and say hey. Well, you'll find me, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm actually one of the promoters of the show.
Nice. Great.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we're working with Venus Concerts, and they're really nice
Oh,
people. It's going to be amazing.
yeah, I love those guys, man. They're
Yeah,
rad. Cool.
yeah.
Okay, awesome, sir. All right, it's nice to meet you.
Me too. And I'll
Hey,
see you in a couple of weeks then. Thank you very
sounds
much.
good. Okay, have
Thanks,
a great
man.
night.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers.